I think Ralf Bode was remarkable because he had such variety to his work. He seemed to be prepared to take anything on, whether it was something that needed a given style already or whether it was something spontaneous. He would take on any subject. He wouldn't be dominated in his choosing by style. He would be dominated by the material. He didn't come to the table with a specific style of filmmaking. He came to the table with the ability to adapt a style to what the movie was demanding. Dressed to Kill and Coal Miner's Daughter couldn't have been more different in the photographic style of them. And that's sort of a great gift. He doesn't fall into any category.
I think there were a lot of things driving his interest, and the visual part was one piece of it. But I would say Ralf and I both grew up in a family that was very involved with technology and the arts. My father was an inventor and had, in the 1930s, had already invented what might well have been the very first totally electronic organ in 1937, and released the mellochord organ. It was the first post-World War II European electronic organ. Ralf was surrounded by somebody who had a workshop in the house, who was dealing with electronics, really pretty unusual. But I think it also gave Ralf a kind of license to experiment. I saw some photos that he took when he was 12 or 11 years old, his first camera. And even at that moment, kind of exploring the camera, exploring what it can do. In some ways, I was surprised Ralf became the cinematographer. Ralf came out of theater and was an actor. So his involvement with the visual arts is somehow through the eyes of an actor and somebody involved with theater.
I didn't know Ralf had been an actor when I first hired him. Once he told me that, it made the whole idea of him doing the job fall into place. I've worked with some DPs who really don't respect actors very much. You know, they sort of think they're machines that go in and out. But the fact that Ralf had been an actor, I thought was incredibly helpful to me. Not so much with dealing with Sissy or Tommy Lee, but dealing with people who weren't ever been actors. So he could understand, you know, what they were going through and how you could lighten the load for them. Because, you know, having these people relaxed and not being intimidated by where Ralf would put lights or stuff like this, I think it was incredibly important that he'd actually put himself through it.
So he was very sensitive. He told me that a number of times, that he was aware of how vulnerable actors are in general, and then actors on a set where the story is out of sequence in most cases, and there are lots of people, technical things going on. Ralf switched from being an actor to a cinematographer by being drafted into the Army during the Vietnam War. He was then learning to be a combat cameraman. But it was the Army that gave him the opportunity to learn filmmaking. But a moment happened that a American soldier who turned out to be German had escaped from the Viet Cong, and there was a big uproar that there were Germans in Vietnam. And Ralf was German. He was not an American citizen. He had his green card. So he was turned around. He did not go to Vietnam. Again, because Ralf worked in theater, he was used to working in many different theatrical styles. So this notion of having a look, like a way of being an actor or a way of being a cinematographer, I think it was just foreign to his background. It didn't make sense.
He wasn't kind of boxed in any particular style. You know, we did 5 movies together, hugely different movies. I was in for sort of a stylish documentary look with Coal Miner's Daughter, or Gorky Park, something more stark. Bring on the Night, which was a film that Sting asked me to make, he wanted a kind of very stylish film. He didn't want a kind of down and dirty job. He wanted it to look elegant. So one of the reasons I went to Ralf for that, you know, we had to be spontaneous. I interviewed people on the spot. We had to catch moments between the band as they were playing, and yet it still needed to look stylish. So it was an almost impossible task. I can't imagine anybody I've ever worked with in that capacity who would be so freewheeling and able to move from style to style within one day, for example. And the thing that attracted me to Ralph in the beginning was that this young man who was my age had done Saturday Night Fever, which I thought was full of life and very modern film and dealt with music, and I was doing a musical film too. Once I met him, I could see how open he was. I thought, this is the man that's going to hold my hand through this experience because, I suppose the advantage was that no one had ever shot in the Appalachians, so I was relying on someone who would be generous with helping me cope with an American crew.
Ralph did that many, many times, where he would be able to kind of turn a moment and relax people and make them feel comfortable. So the idea of collaborating with the director wasn't a foreign idea. He collaborated, in a sense, with everybody on the set. Brian De Palma being the exception in this case, that it was a different kind of relationship. He had a lot of respect for him because Brian really had a very developed visual style already. But a lot of the directors that Ralph worked with were just starting out. They didn't have a committed style.
Well, he found his visual style, I think, with research. When we did Gorky Park, that was a bit of a nightmare because they wouldn't let us film in Russia. We went to scout it and all that, and they threw us out because they said crime doesn't happen in the Soviet Union, so how can you do a film about crime? So then we had to look at a lot of materials. I found it very difficult, and he was very helpful with the production designer, Paul Silbert. We had to create a world of the Soviet Union, which we don't know very much about at that time, and recreate it in Scandinavia.
At the beginning of the shoot, he was excited about doing the scouting. I remember that he telling me, yeah, that's what I'm doing the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm really looking forward to it. Basic scouting was with the camera and film stock that he was going to be shooting. So he could see how the locations being translated into a visual. Then this new piece of technology came, a Portapack video unit, and he shot more. My guess is that what that would have allowed him to do is to try how to move through that space and how to capture a kind of atmosphere and tone.
He would go to locations and he would shoot locations, or, he'd be involved in the building of sets and stuff like this because, in all the different films, Gorky Park, Coal Miner's Daughter, we needed very specific looks, the bleakness of the Soviet interior and the kind of the historical warmth, if you want, of the Appalachian cabins. The way the sets were designed, so you could have source lights, so you could have windows, so you could have lamps and all this sort of stuff. He was very particular about where his light sources were because he knew that he couldn't flood, a suburban town in New Jersey for Firstborn with all sorts of wonderful light. But it seems to me that, great DPs draw their sense of light from the reality of the work they're doing, and that's part of their research, part of their job.
Ralph was not so interested in the images being Ralph's images. It wasn't about him. It was about what this particular piece was, what the film was, what the script was. Ralph was disturbed that the visual arts had an elitism to them that made it very difficult for a regular person to engage. And it was one of the reasons that he loved the cinema, that he thought it was actually gave a fair shake to human beings. And Ralph was a populist, and he thought that if you made good films, in a sense, anybody could view those films, and you would be communicating to their intelligence. Cinematography was not just delivering an illusion, but moving the spectator. And he got to experiment on the set with people who were also interested in experimenting. And I think, he was very lucky to work with some really terrific people.
Well, I think Ralph never got the credit that he deserved. He was never really a fashionable DP. But you look at his work, and he's done some terrific movies, some important movies. And one of the reasons, that I wanted to do this, although, I had nothing to do with Dressed to Kill, is that I just think Ralph never got the credit he deserved because he was an unpretentious man. He never sought the light. He wasn't a kind of arty-farty guy. He was a good working cameraman, and that's not in any sense to put him down because he was enormously skillful. And for me, those are the best people, the people who work hard, who know what they're doing. don't have pretensions and do the job. You know, he died before he was 60, and he had a lot more films in him, so maybe we never saw what else he could do, but I just never thought he got the respect or the power that he should have had.